Copy streaming link. Eric and Kirsten, I'm placing the link, the YouTube link on the chat.
Awesome.
And I also need to mute myself, otherwise I hear myself on YouTube too. So hello everyone, thank you for joining us. We'll be getting started soon. We're just letting people in and also making sure everything works. So give us a few minutes and we'll get started. So actually, I'll share our very fancy PowerPoint. Not. Okay, so. Since I'm sharing the screen, I cannot see the waiting room. So Eric or Kristy, if you can let people in. Okay. So give us a couple more minutes and then we'll get started. Okay, so, there you go. Hello, everyone. Looks like, a couple people from San Diego, great. Someone from Chicago, thank you for joining us 2 hours ahead. Like it's a bit late or early, I don't know, 9 p.m. in Central Time. So we'll just give it 1 more minute and then we'll, New York City, cool.
Thanks for staying up, Margo.
And Jersey. I think we could get started. As you can see, this is a very DIY type of venture in terms of technology, but I'll get. By no means I'm the one, like that want to bore you with my voice. I want to acknowledge everyone. Thank you for being here. Also, thank you to Kristy Martínez and Eric Valdez for joining today. And first things first, this is kind of like the very simple agenda that we're gonna have today. And the one thing I want to do is let you know that we're gonna record this. As you can see, we're also on YouTube, and the YouTube link it is already posted on the chat. Also, for the first part of our talk, and we are going to try to be as concise, so we're done within an hour or maybe earlier, hopefully. And because after that, we do have an after party. So hopefully you saw it, and it's BIYOP. Well, at least on Zoom. Okay. So after that, it'll be, very chaotic type of after party chat, and please feel free to stay. We're also going to allow, do some breakout rooms so we can, go check in with folks. And once we do the Q&A, we'll turn everybody's camera on in case you want to be on. And also if you want to say your own question out loud, that'd be also cool. But if in the meantime, if there's questions or comments, definitely use the chat. That's going to, all three of us are going to be monitoring the chat, so that definitely we'll be looking at what you're telling us from there. So that's the tech stuff introduction, and we do have a poll at some point, so we'll share with you all that poll. And just by the order of, we went alphabetical here. We're going to start with Kristy Martínez. We decided that we're going to do our own introductions ourselves. So Kristy will be telling you all about, her amazing work after the first year in musicology at UCLA. And then that would be followed by Eric. And, he's also very solid and interesting work with No Snappers. So he'll tell you more about it. And then I'll end up with my own 2 cents on the Rock Archivo LA. We'll also have a bed of music from that we think it signifies or represents the scenes that we work on. And yes, we saw your questions, so thank you for sending them in advance. We'll be trying to answer some of those. And as I said, we'll have a Q&A from questions that you can think of now. We'll work on them. So first, without further ado, Kristy, do you want me to play the song first, or you want to introduce yourself and then play the song?
I could introduce myself quickly, and then we could play the song. So hi, everybody. Thank you all for joining us today. So my name is Kristy Martínez. I'm a first-year PhD student at UCLA in the musicology department. I did my master's in American Indian Studies at UCLA, and then history for my bachelor's at UCLA. I just guess I can't leave there. But yeah, I love history, love punk rock. I grew up in El Monte and love the punk rock scene. So just wanted to study everything punk. And my family comes from Sonora. I'll share some of that, but that kind of pushed me, being of Yaqui descent, that really pushed me to know more and kind of see what was going on as far as indigenous punk, like what representation there was. And I am in a band. I'm a mother. So this is very DIY. I do what I can, but I am always, taking feedback and trying to learn and do the best job that I can. So you'll see more or less more about the archive through the PowerPoint. And yeah, you could play the music. This particular song, I mean, I couldn't even pick a song because there's so many amazing artists. The song I chose is Still Here by band Low Cash Ninjas. Unfortunately, one of the members, Darren, passed away recently. So I definitely wanted to share their music. He was an awesome individual. I didn't know him too much just through the archive, but just very sweet person. So I wanted to share their music. And I mean, they're one of the biggest bands on the Navajo Res and inspire many others and do a lot of great things. So I'll share some of the lyrics through the PowerPoint, but this is Still Here. And this is the version I found on YouTube. So.
Okay.
All right.
Okay, just wanted to show a little other music. And then I could share my PowerPoint now. Definitely with this archive, as we're setting up, I just want to share, you know, I've been learning so much, and I definitely do not, you know, as people tend to want to show like what people call poverty, indigenous communities as rural and all this, like that's definitely not. There is a DIY entrepreneurs, have record companies. They're doing a lot of great things. So definitely that is something that I am trying to do within this archive is kind of, I'll explain a little bit more, but push that narrative placed on indigenous folks. So this is the archive, Indigenous Punx Archive. The logo, the beautiful logo was designed by OXDX Clothing. They are a Dene company, and they created this for the archive, and just a design that they had in mind. I thought it was super awesome. And that is kind of like the icon I adopted for the archive. I'm so blessed that they kind of helped me out with that. And so you could go on to the next slide, Jorge. So quickly, we heard some of the song, but the lyrics are just very powerful. And it's this great ska band, ska punk band. And it's interesting, we've shared so many ties to each other's archive. This band has friends in Almonte, and you know, the punk scene, it's such a small world, so it's just super interesting. So some of the lyrics, I'm not a mascot, I'm not a drunk, I'm not extinct, you fucking punk, I'm not an immigrant, I've been here, I'll survive genocide another 1,000 years. So very powerful, switching the script, you know, big F you to, you know, narratives placed on indigenous folks and just badass musicians. Jorge, you could go to the next slide, please. So I'll just share, so a lot of this is my thesis work. What I did not want to do is just keep it in a vault. I wanted to share it to the public and the community that I am, or the communities I am working with, mostly in the Southwest, but at the same time, you know, there's indigenous folks from all over, and I hope to make some kind of a network. But this is, I worked with the band Sihasin, a Dene band, very influential on the punk scene. This is kind of the biggest quote of my thesis that they've told me, and I thought it was super interesting and great. So people perceive us, always have the perception of us as indigenous people in the past. Now they don't see us in the future. So how do we look in other people's eyes when we pull up to a place wearing beads and feathers and playing punk rock? It was like we threw a bucket of cold water and woke them up. They're like, wow, okay, indigenous people are alive and well. They were not all killed off by John Wayne. We are still here in the present. That's by Clayson Benally of Sihasin. Next slide, please. So again, my family inspired this. Both sides of my family are Yoem from Sonora, and my grandma was a teacher. It wasn't cool to, you know, be Indio, as they said, in Mexico. So they, you know, kind of assimilated, and you know, a lot of ties were lost. And what I would say, UCLA kind of gave me tools to kind of try to get back that history, the language. I have colleagues that are teaching the Yaqui language, but this really inspired me to not just cut ties with that, but to know more. I mean, my father, or my grandmother's father, who spoke Yaqui, and you know, unfortunately we didn't learn it. So this is something that is, and see methods that they're doing in regards to language and music and things like that. The next slide, please, Jorge. So quickly, I got inspired. You know, there's the tragic and terrible boarding school history that has happened in the United States and in Canada and different parts, where sorry, I'm admitting somebody in the chat, where indigenous youth were made to, you know, abused, unfortunate things happen. They were in marching bands, and there's a vast history that I've, many are doing already, but, you know, I kind of studied, and that, you know, they became musicians, and over time, They created their own music and inspired their children and generations further with migration and making their own bands, and then that led to rock and roll. So really watching Rumble really inspired me. It touches on rock and roll, but I was curious also about punk rock, and I talked to the producer, Stevie Salas, and we kind of had a conversation that he had to cut so much. There was so much history that, you know, Richie Valens is Yaqui ancestry as well, and just all these things that he had to cut out because there was so much. Okay, next slide, Jorge. Also, quickly, I got inspired. I was watching a Los Crudos documentary for class, and they were showing during the 1990s some flyers that they had gone to, and I paused and saw this very quick flyer. It said Navajo Res Show, and I was so interested. I'm like, what? Like, you know, like, where are these flyers? What's going on? So this really inspired the archive itself. To kind of, and having family in Arizona, I was very curious to kind of see what was out there as far as archives and flyers. The next slide, please, Jorge. So briefly, this is really long, but, you know, again, with the Los Crudos documentary, I got inspired by Pat Sevilla and her use of archive of fillings, where I'll read right here, my notes. So archive of fillings, explorative of cultural texts as repositories of feelings and emotions, which are encoded not only in the content of the texts themselves, but in practices. So in the case with Los Crudos, with performance, with lyrics, that they're kind of turning this narrative placed upon them, immigrants at this time in the 1990s. I wanted to kind of use this framework for the archive, how Indigenous communities are turning away narratives placed on them. Also very inspired by Amanda Blackhorse, who advocates for against mascots. And, you know, right now there's a monument movement, Dr. Coulthard, that talks about recognition and turning away from settler colonialism. And other scholars, I have my advisors, Kyle T. Mays, who does Indigenous hip hop, that really inspired me. You know, I learned a lot from them. Also, of course, the Jones Benally family with Sihasin and those bands, talking to musicians, activists, and a whole lot of people that have inspired this. So it's not just me, it's a whole community that is doing this. Next slide, Jorge. Okay, and so just through a conversation, we have Sihasin with their father, who is a traditional medicine man. They play punk rock. He is in the band. You know, very rich conversations I had with Sihasin. Through conversations and with the Flagstaff scene of the 1990s, in my thesis, I kind of uncovered from Millions of Dead Cops, that flyer that was on there. There was, you know, forced relocation of Navajo communities. And this was a 1986 flyer from Millions of Dead Cops, a non-native band that were involved in this. The Offspring were also involved in the 1990s and went to reservations and such. So this history of punk that, you know, really interested me and is there, you know, and I'm not the first one. I know folks have been working on this for a while. The next slide, please. And this is another band from the 1990s in Flagstaff. The drummer, Sandy, she's Dene. This is Primitive Tribes. They helped me a lot with a lot of info in the 1990s. The next slide, please. And of course, I have to shout out Apache Skateboards. As I've learned through this whole process of the archive, they've been doing punk rock, San Carlos and skateboarding. Like, they've been doing it forever, and they're barely getting recognition, and they have an awesome documentary, but I mean, they've been doing punk rock forever. So I just want to shout that out. The next slide. Also, I'm just sharing some things that I love on the archives. So Black Belt Eagle Scout is an amazing artist as well from Portland. And with these flyers, what is great is that they're reclaiming ancestral land. You know, instead of just saying Los Angeles, it'll say Tongva land, which I'm very thankful that I am a student on Tongva land. But yeah, like it's great to see these flyers that are reclaiming space. The next slide, please. Also have to shout out Chapter House that have been promoting and doing shows and great work for the queer community. And they've been doing this in the Navajo Nation. So it's not, wow, I miraculously like found stuff. These folks have been doing it for a while. I have to shout out Becky, who's doing amazing work as well. She's like, I look up to her so much. The next slide, please. Quickly, I also, on the archive, one of the things I thought was so cool is in Tucson, the hardcore scene, which is, a lot of these are border towns, and I'll say a lot of this work is not pretty. There is a lot of violence on the border towns. There's racism. Flagstaff is a very racist city against Indigenous folks. So it's, you know, I see this stuff, and but there is this unity in Tucson with Indigenous communities. And I thought this was super cool because you have like Otham, Apache, Yaqui folks all coming together, maybe tribal communities that would never really come in contact or you know, might have histories, and they're enjoying hardcore music. So I think that's super cool. The next slide, please. And here's some more flyers. I think one is a little blurry on my side, but just the amazing artwork. I have folks like artist Ryan Singer. I have several artists on here that share their work and are inspired by the punk archive, and they've been doing this work. It's not like they saw this, but you know, like art like this, I don't know if y'all could see it, but you know, this is Skid Skunks that makes amazing artwork, punk inspired, and they use traditional elements from their culture and are doing super cool punk rock things. On the next slide. And also want to shout out the Bluebird pinups, again, incorporating their tradition. And I'm trying to learn how to be very respectful too with the traditions, as I am not from certain communities, trying to position myself and be very honest about it. But just the beautiful pinup style that they have, incorporating their and it's different tribes. It's Apache, Dene, it's Pueblo, incorporating their beautiful traditional styles. And yeah, they're doing great work for community as well. Next slide. And I'm wrapping up, but also the importance of this archive is not just for UCLA or anything or for my benefit. I showed this work along with Jorge and our colleague Audrey. We did a panel, and it was the day before National Day of Awareness for Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women. And there's an amazing straight edge hardcore band called With War, decolonial hardcore. They're amazing. They shared this. So I borrowed and shared this, and I had the pleasure to present in front of Alice Begg, who was in attendance as the UC Riverside conference, and she saw this, and I, just said, hey, tomorrow, this day, if folks could wear red, and she
I think Kristy froze. Hopefully she'll come back soon. Let's see. Yes, unfortunately she froze. So she had one more slide, and I'm sure she'll. Oh, there you are.
The man's trying to stop me. No, I'm just kidding. I don't know where I left off, but yeah, just that these conversations need to be had. And, somebody as iconic as Alice Begg saw this, and, these conversations are on social media and making a difference, and to Indigenous punk rock fans. The last slide. So wrapping up, have so much more to say, but do not want to, I'm taking up too much time. But I would love if folks, I could put it in the chat. I'm definitely trying to, I've donated a bit, but if folks can, I know times are tough, but the Navajo and Hopi COVID Relief Fund, here's some links. COVID, you know, just being a border town and the government kind of failing as far as the US government. These are some links if folks could donate or do what they can for these communities. I definitely, especially working with them, I can't sit by and just act like, you know, oh, extract and things like that. So
Sorry.
yes, thank you.
Sorry.
You know, thanks everybody.
Thank you, Kristy, and please do send her comments and questions to Kristy on the chat. And I mean, it's always amazing to hear what she's working on, and also how her research and her methodologies continue to evolve. So up next is Eric. And Eric, do you want to introduce yourself, or do you want me to play the song? Whichever way you would like.
Play it. Go ahead.
Perfect.
Oh, this is a track by a band from San Gabriel. Came out in '96. They're the Genitals.
What are you today? Why you look so cool? You just find everything you go and think you're wrong. Do you think I'm bad? Do you think I'm dumb? No, try to press the record. Try to think I'm something dumb. First day you close up. You try to bang. First day you want to go. Go away and make me sick. But you know everyone. That's the thing you do. Try to shit like everyone and who's not for you. Do you think I'm bad? Do you think I'm dumb? No, try to press the record. Try to think I'm something dumb. First day you close up. You try to bang. First day you want to go. Go away and make me sick. What are you today? Why you look so cool? With your spice and change, you try to think you're wrong. Do you think you're bad? Do you think you're dumb? No, try to press the record. Try to think something good. First day you close up. Ready for the bang. First day you asshole. Go away and make me sad.
Okay,
and,
so
the reason I chose this song is that was off of the very first punk demo that I ever received when I, you know, first stumbled onto the San Gabriel Valley punk scene, and they are among the first bands that I saw at the first gig that I went to. So they're kind of they mean a lot to me. That's kind of my. That they were there at the I guess ground zero for my initiation into the punk scene.
and if you can tell us a little bit more about yourself, Eric, and you know about this amazing archive that you have.
Sure. I guess entered the San Gabriel Valley punk rock scene
Eric, since it's kind of breaking, I'm going to turn off the I'm going to turn off the screen, Eric. See if it works out better. Bear with us. Eric got cut off. And so I think he's going to join us right now. So And Justin, yes, I think that once he joins in, Eric, you're there. Why don't we do this? Turn your. We're gonna turn your camera off, and that way we can show the slides. Okay, so if you can just narrate the slides, that'd be great. So.
Sure. Okay. Yeah, that's okay. Let's see. Where did I leave off?
You were introducing yourself, so I'm just gonna stop your video. That way, I show the
Cool.
slides. Okay.
Cool.
And
cool.
how you started with this project.
Okay, so let's see. I went to my first gig in 1996. That's the I guess local terminology for a backyard party with punk bands. After going to this gig, well, a few months after, I would end up joining a band that played there, and I had been an active participant in the San Gabriel Valley punk scene pretty steadily from 1996 to 2003, when my band had ultimately broken up. And then I started pursuing fine art and realized that if I want to paint something, I don't have to, call up 4 other dudes and see if they're ready for me to start painting. I could just do that on my own. So that's why I shifted more of my focus to painting and kind of left the scene behind a little bit. I would check in from time to time and go to gigs and shows. And so I a few years ago I graduated from Art Center in Pasadena, and that's kind of gave me the, I guess, know-how to be able to tackle an archive in this particular manner. In the, would say mid-2000s, back when MP3 blogs were a thing, I had started an MP3 blog with a bunch of demo tracks and stuff from these bands that I had been in a scene with, and it was primarily focused on the bands that I was familiar with while I was in the scene. So mostly 1996 through very early 2000s. And it was a project that I kind of had gotten bored with a little bit. And so I just, I stopped it. And then over the years, friends of mine would ask me, hey, what's going on with this blog? I really dug it. Do you have tracks from so-and-so? And I was flattered that these people that were involved in the scene responded so well to this blog. But it wasn't until a couple of years ago when I went to the Vincent Price Art Museum at ELAC for Guadalupe Rosales's Map Points exhibit, when I realized that I could take what I'm doing or what I had done and just throw it onto Instagram, but also with the my graphic design skill set, kind of add my own flavor to it, put up videos and just kind of make it my own instead of just posting flyers and pictures. I'd be able to add a little bit more of it. Jorge, can you go back to the previous slide, please? And so this is kind of, tracks my, I wouldn't say evolution or whatever through the punk scene, but the image on the left is me at, I think, 15 or 16. And one of the very first, below it is one of the very first gig flyers that I had designed for a band that, for a show that my band had played. We ended up recording, and a couple of years later, and I being in a band kind of really gave me the graphic design bug, and so and also because punk rock is so DIY, someone's got to make flyers, someone's got to design merch, and so I took on that role, and then we started playing, getting a lot more shows, and playing in different areas. This one was image on the far right, that's from a show that we played in Bakersfield. I mean, we didn't travel too far out, but it was really cool to be able to, get involved in different scenes. And then below that is was one of my very earliest attempts at, digital, making a flyer digitally. And that was actually all MS Paint at the time. And I think I came up with that in like 2003. Next, please, Jorge. And so No Snappers covers the San Gabriel Valley punk scene with, images, with photos of bands playing, videos, flyers, and rather than sticking to just the era of the punk scene that I was actively involved with, I've decided to kind of go as far back in the history of San Gabriel Valley punk scene as I can. And one of the earliest bands in the scene was the Simple Tones. They were from Rosemead, and below that is a flyer from a 1978 show headlined by the Skulls, who were primarily known as one of the early Hollywood, LA punk rock bands. But what I had discovered after I had posted this flyer, someone had commented and mentioned that two of the members were from Arcadia. So the San Gabriel Valley punk scene has, its influence has been felt throughout kind of the more well-known Los Angeles, Hollywood punk scene of the early 80s. Then the band to the right of that is Circle One, who were from Pico Rivera. They still play, not the original lineup though. Unfortunately, in the early 90s, their lead singer John Macias was murdered by police. There's tons of information on that. I urge you to go just do a quick Google search on Circle One and John Macias to get more background on that. But they were another one of the links between the San Gabriel Valley punk scene and the LA, the more well-known LA punk scene. They would play with all of the well-known bands like Black Flag, Youth Brigade, and they also opened up for the Misfits. They were a very key part of the scene, and they still exist today, and with of course a different lineup. Below that is a flyer for a show that that Circle One had put together through their at the T-Bird Roller Dome, a roller skating rink that used to be in Pico Rivera. And so they had brought over, and it wasn't uncommon for them to bring over bands like Circle Jerks, or as you see on this flyer, Bad Religion, Vandals, Descendants, and have them play at not only their shows that they would set up at the T-Bird Roller Dome, but these bands would also play at a surprising amount of venues that were active in the San Gabriel Valley throughout most of the 80s. There was still a backyard scene even then, but there were also a lot of venues that bands could play at as well. And so this band, as I said, kind of was more of a they started off in the 80s. The next band to the right of them, that's Schlupp Rock. They I think they started around 89. They were all kind of from the South Pasadena area. They also, a couple of members were from LA's very first skinhead oi band. And then they eventually broke up, and Schlupp Rock came after that project. And they turned out to be one of the, I guess, well, as far as I know, the only band from the San Gabriel Valley punk scene that had ended up on MTV. In about, I'd say 96, 97, I saw one of their videos, a video that they had done for a song off of their major label debut on MTV's 120 Minutes, and it was amazing to see a band that I had at the time just heard of in the to get as much exposure as they did. And of course, at the time people were calling them sellouts or whatever, but that's another discussion for another time. And below that is a flyer for a series of shows that happened in La Puente at a venue, a short-lived, well, it's a restaurant and a club, I think, but for about a year and a half, it was one of the very few venues in the San Gabriel Valley. And they had some really, really, really great shows. The show that's listed on the bottom is a really good example of a show that had a lot of people documenting it. On No Snappers, I've been lucky enough to post videos from this show that someone had uploaded. Another person had sent me photos of Naked Aggression and Creep Show and I think most of the bands that played that night. And then someone else has sent me other pictures. There's a couple more flyers for that show. And to the right of that is a couple of shots of Threatening Verse from I think this shot was taken in 2006, and they're a band actually that had been around since the mid 90s, mid to late 90s, and had steadily just drawn a very, very huge following. Actually, these shots are from a show that they had played at the Henry Fonda Theater, opening up for the Casualties and Crumb Bums and a lot of great street punk bands. But there's some shots on the internet and that I posted of on No Snappers, which shows the band and a really great shot of the crowd. And they may have been the first band on that bill, but they played to a very, very huge crowd. And then below that is a flyer for a 2005 gig where that's just an example of kind of one of the last flyers that this band, the Dictions, appeared on. And unfortunately, from about I guess the MySpace era on, paper flyers have become more and more scarce. Next one, please, Jorge. And so this is the way that that I lay out the posts on No Snappers. They kind of go in a series of 3. To the right, that's usually where you'll be able to find flyers and images and video and whatnot from the 80s. Then to the left is 90s, and then after that is the 2000s. Next one, please. And so early on in No Snappers, I kind of gave it more of a, I don't know, I think I try to make it a little too graphic designy. I'm not really doing these grids anymore, but that's there to kind of illustrate, or to illustrate another way that, or let's see, how can I phrase this? Basically, this is another example of a show that had various people documenting it. I had one of the flyers, and then someone else had sent me another flyer for the show that I had never seen, and then another someone in another band, turns out, had been recording some of the bands, and so there's another source of archival material that was thrown in there. And fortunately, there have been a handful of other shows where I've been able to find images from one person, flyer from another person, video from another person. That's kind of been some of the most one of the most gratifying things about this project. So that's kind of No Snappers in a nutshell.
Very cool. Very cool. Let me see. I don't know if I'm the one that can turn your camera on, Eric, but you know, so I have stopped sharing. And as I said, thank you everyone for putting up with our DIY setup. So now it's my turn. Let me just get my, first, I think I'll be showing you the video that I chose for, to exemplify kind of the scene that I work on, which is rock angelino, Latin alternative, rock en español, stuff like that. So I'll share the video and then I'll give you the introduction of who I am and what I do. So these are Los Abandoned, and this is actually a clip from 2006, I want to say, no, 2004. I should know that better. So what they're doing here is like cruising to in Van Nuys, that's in the San Fernando Valley, and the lyrics are bilingual.
And Van Nuys is porno stars and swap meets wanted by a car legality, a strip malls, too older when park, and who are you to tell me that it's better when you've never seen sense? It's in my truth be true. Lower middle class that you can only find her house. Gente con muchos acentos viven en apartamentos. The sun is hot, it's hell, the bus is always like the great big cloud of smog that makes you choke and hate. Y dejaste tu país por esto. Oh! Van Nuys es very nice. Van Nuys es very nice. Van Nuys es very nice, but it's not paradise. Van Nuys es very nice. Van Nuys es very nice. Van Nuys es very nice, but it's not paradise. And Van Nuys got celebrities, complete no conscious struggle to his students. His teachers got for prom but didn't get too far. A strip on fire, rages on Valerio. Well, Letty bumps la raza on the stereo. 20 pegaditas, no corridos. Van Nuys es very.
Okay, and I'll leave it there. So as I said, that's Los Abandoned with their song Van Nuys. So let's see. And by the way, I'll introduce myself, but before that, definitely send any questions, comments to Eric on the chat. As I, you know, like there's plenty more that I'm sure he can tell you about the 626 and Gabriel scene. And the more I look at his work, it's always really interesting how much, how many different scenes throughout the different time they had happened in the San Gabriel Valley. So now for my participation, I have to say that first, I was a participant of this whole rock angelino, rock en español, Latin alternative. However, we chose to define it in the 90s and 2000s. And after that, I went into grad school as a master's at Cal State Northridge, and then I did a PhD in history. I define myself as a cultural and urban historian, and my PhD is in. I did that at UC San Diego. Then I did a postdoc at University of Southern California, USC, in American Studies and Ethnicity Department, and in the History Department. And just today, I started my my job as an assistant professor in the History Department at UC Riverside. So that's. But most, I think that for the purpose of this is I am somebody that always thought about this music. And rather not only the music, but the circuits of cultural exchange that have taken between Southern California and Latin America. So that's what informs my archive. So let me share my slides, and by sharing my slides, what I'll do is also I'll turn myself off. That way, hopefully we have less of a delay or cutting off. So give me 1 second. Stop my video. So now, Okay. So the way I think about the archive, and first of all, for me, what I share on Instagram is rather a reflection of the archive of what has been collected, both digitally and also in paper. And that's what I share. And what I find really important is to document the undocumented, be it undocumented in terms of legal status of a lot of the participants of the Rock Angelino scene were either youth with perhaps uncertain status, legal status in the U.S., or first and second generation that perhaps had U.S. citizenship, but that history that or predominant culture was not really documenting their experiences as youth or as people in Southern California. And so that is for me what drives my work, to document that what has been put at the margins of history or has been put at the margins of youth scenes or just music cultures, that when we think about them, they tend to be very mainstream. And even when we think of the punk scene, when we see like what work has been done or how it's shown, it is predominantly like a white male scene, and we know that that's not. I mean, just by looking at these flyers or just digging in on who have been the participants of these scenes, we know that there's been people of color, there's been also queers in these scenes, but like the representations have always been very normative. So what is it? What's the Rock Archivo? That's kind of like the what drives my work. And also I'll tell you a little bit about what archival and DIY models I follow. What are the materials that I have collected, and a bit of the future projects that I'm taking on. So I think that several of you have already seen the different materials that I share and collect. And when this started, it was predominantly my own stuff. I had hoarded or collected all these different flyers, thinking, okay, one day I'll give them to somebody so they can write about this. I never really thought that it was going to be necessarily me, or but especially there was a time that I thought I needed to write something different. I mean, something more, like in terms of history, like stuff that it's in the archives. But then the more I started thinking about this was what we historians call a blind spot. Very few people had really written on this history, and also the connections to this part of the late 20th century, which is the 1980s, 1990s, 2000, 2010s. We know what has happened in both in Latin America, Mexico, and also the US and Los Angeles in particular, but it is merging those different historical moments to what youth and what cultural producers were creating, were responding to. And I think that the more I thought about it, the more I thought, oh, this is this is quite interesting to see this, especially because we don't sometimes we miss seeing it in different archives, but also what does this tell us from communities from below, communities that really have been in the midst of all these historical changes and movements, but what have they said, either through their cultural production, or how they participated? And I'm sure that, several of us have thought about this. We are either the product of those migrations from Latin America during this time, or now what has happened in Southern California, such as the 1992 uprising, propositions 187, 209, 207, which were very racist in nature propositions, and how what was this type of youth culture was responding, police brutality throughout the 1990s and the 2000s, and then the 2000s, 9/11, how that further constricts immigration flows and the militarization of borders, also the Latin American financial crisis, and then the really not necessarily the start, but like the growing of a massive immigrants' right movement, and then we can go into the 2000s. So for me, what is really interesting is to find how these youth cultures were responding to that moment, but also not only documenting what they were going, but but finding the dignity and the defiance, like how these different bands concert goers really took on messages or symbols that were slided towards them, or how they were depict them in almost helpless ways, and they turned them around to be signs of empowerment. So this is an example that I have looked in different of these archival sources, such as Los Olvidados, kind of like a ska fusion band from the 1990s in Rock Angelino. And they're one of the first bands to start using this sign that we see at the border, which is like, watch for people crossing the road. And these are seen as helpless, or just like immigrants, just like running. And how through the use of this iconography, they started changing it to like, no, I'm an immigrant, and this is this is a sign that I'm taking of empowerment. So I see that both in the iconography that the bands use, also in their lyrics, and as you saw in Los Abandon, the Spanglish, and talking about how for Los Abandon, they're talking about how Van Nuys is very nice, and they, when you're an immigrant, you think that this might be quote unquote the American dream, but when you're here and you're living it, you see how you're racialized, and you see how it might not be at all true, and you write a much more complex reality to it. So that's what I see how Los Abandon and Los Olvidados in an earlier era were doing. And so in terms of just to tell you about the DIY, archival, and crowdsourcing models, I'm definitely inspired by all the different DIY youth cultures approaches, such as scene publishing practices, all the different scenes that have been created by different music scenes and youth cultures, the flyerings. And definitely Guadalupe Rosales with her Veterans and Rucas and Mad Points have really shown us the possibilities of Instagram as an archive. I'm also very interested in the work that Archives of Color, Archiving While Black, these organizations that are preserving, archiving, and sharing the Black experience. And also other archival efforts by archives that look at racialized communities, such as the South Asian American Digital Archive, which is quite a vast repository for family histories for Southeast Asian Americans, which I also find very informative to what I do. So in terms of what is it that I have archived so far, as I said, what you see in the in Instagram is a digital reflection of the material that has been collected by me so far. And as this is crowdsourced, people have sent me their stuff. People send me their photos, such as you can see Victor here. He was a participant, also an employee of Ritmo Latino, and he has a ton of really interesting stuff. Also flyers, you see those different flyers. Letters. I collect material from a time right before the internet, so people were communicating through letters, and these are letters going between Los Angeles and Mexico City, Buenos Aires, Argentina, Santiago de Chile, and how people were so excited to hear about this new music, and also learning what it was like to be a young person in Buenos Aires or a young person in Chile post the dictatorship of Pinochet. Also, tickets. There was a time people used to have tickets to go into shows, and then all this collection of scenes. And it's really interesting to read the different articles and how immigrants and also youth coming of age in Los Angeles were seeing this, chronicling and understanding Los Angeles as this still very racialized place, and in which places they seem welcome or not. And something that I'm very interested is in mapping, how people, how these flyers have these maps, and how people understood their place by creating these maps and having these maps in the back of these flyers, which I consider them, rather than counter mapping, is mapping from below. How these communities understood and recreated space through these mapping practices. And I have a short essay that was recently published in the California History Journal, and so I continue to think about this. This again, maps were placed at a moment before the internet, before we had Waze and Google Maps. So for me, it's not only how you get to a particular place where the show is going to happen, but how do you understand yourself in the city? So lastly, for future projects, for me, what's really important is to have multiple, both institutional, also digital homes for the physical and digital archives, just in case, Instagram goes out of fashion. Where else can we have this? And also to have many different multiple homes. So it's not only one place, one institution that has this access to these materials, and other people can share them. Scholars can see them, and also bands can continue to preserve their productions. Also crowdsource. For me, it's really important to have this open sharing accessibility so people can study this and also result in new knowledge production. My hope is that more people do this, so we get even much more in depth with all these different youth cultures. And in that, for me, it's also this collaborative analysis, these meanings of the time period and also the cultural productions. Whatever I can come up with, I'm sure it's sometimes it's very different from what others can come in with their own lenses. And then one thing that it's work in progress for me is how do I do an audio archive? And I do currently have about over 200 Rock Angelino recordings that were created in either cassettes or CDs and various limited runs. And what would it be like? So I'm still thinking through that. And also I have a ton of video that, as you can see, Instagram does not quite lend itself to long form video. So those are the future projects that I keep thinking about. So thank you for listening and also coming in and listening. And I'll stop this and we'll start with the Q&A now. So we have the questions that you submitted. And so what I'll do is I'll share the first three, and then we'll take either myself, Eric, or Kristy. We'll take one of them. So let me just share them. I share the questions again. So here are our first three questions. And so the first one is by My Disorder Scene. And I think, Eric, you're the person to answer this, which is, what advice would you give to a person who wants to preserve their local punk scene?
Well, first of all, I would start by actually getting involved in your scene in a way that contributes to it. Like I said, I was in a band, so I had flyers because I was in a band that had flyers made. And so that was a way for me to directly engage. But, if you're not going to do that, go to shows, go to as many as you can, save flyers, take pictures, get in contact with other people that are going to shows, or even better yet, people that have been going to shows before you have. It's really just a matter of just doing it. And I can't stress that enough. If you want to document a scene, a lot of people have the tools to do that right on them. Take pictures of shows, post them on Instagram, post videos on YouTube. Do it in any way that you can. But if you can do it, but if you can get involved in a scene, then all the better.
Oh, I'll just, that's a great point, Eric. Also, like, I mean, in researching bands and going on their pages, there is a particular band that I work with, and they have like videotapes or VHS just sitting there, and like cassettes and things that people feel that is not important. They don't think that there's any importance to it. So not saying like being the one to help, take it and run with it, but, there is importance in that, in preserving all the hard work that people have put into their scenes. And, but, just having those conversations, folks might have, oh, I have this, or I have this, that, thinking it's nothing important. It's all the hard work that they've done over years, or that they should get recognized for. So just simple conversations, or looking at band pages, and like there was a whole catalog pretty much on their band page, and I'm like, oh my God, Flagstaff 1990s Offspring, all these bands that were there, that is just, they don't think that it matters or things like that.
Any of you want to take another one of the questions that we have on the screen?
Okay, yeah. Let's see. I'll go to the question on the bottom from Margot. How do you organize and care for materials, both physical and digital? Have you reached out to professional archivists for help? The only physical materials that I have are the ones that are actually mine, that I've had from being involved in the scene. And a lot of that is, well, as you can see behind me, records, and I have, quite a bit. And I, as much as I'll try to pick up anything that I see at a record shop or flea market or whatever that relates to the San Gabriel Valley music scene. One, because I'm a vinyl geek, and two, I have this project, so I need to have it. But in terms of like photographs and stuff like that, I've learned now that that it's important to store photos in acid-free sleeves. So I have, and this is just for my personal stuff. So I've already, bundled up photos from broken them down into different years and held onto them that way. And then I have several of these folders that I've kept my own flyers in. And like I said, this is stuff that I have, my own personal stuff with no snappers. I'm really not trying to take on a lot of materials. If people want to donate things to me, that's great. Actually, yesterday, someone reached out to me and wanted to send me a bunch of flyers. I'm both thrilled and really nervous because now I have that added responsibility of, caring for these things. And I'm a messy dude. And, there's even stuff of my own that's gotten ripped or whatever. And I try to do as much as I can to minimize that, but things happen. In terms of digital stuff, there was a lesson that I learned a few years ago when I had the MP3 blog that I spoke about. There was I had a bunch of stuff stored on MediaFire. After a while, MediaFire, a file hosting service, that shut down. And I didn't realize that there was, well, fortunately I had most of the tracks backed up, and I wasn't using MediaFire as my sole place to archive all this stuff. But there was one compilation album that I just didn't have any backup files for. So since so I learned a lesson from that, and just ended up taking everything that I have and everything that I keep getting in terms of submissions from other people, flyers that I find online, and or just videos that I put together, and I just throw them into a hard drive because I can't rely on Instagram to save all of this stuff. So I try to be very diligent about making sure that all of these digital files that I have end up in a hard drive. So in case Instagram disappears somehow, I still have all the stuff backed up.
In a lot of ways, I try to use echoing Eric. I have actually reached out and to professional archivists that have given me, at first I thought I was doing the right thing, and then they told me, well, this is how actually we do it. So I take the kind of their best practices, both in the archiving and also in the provenance and the process of it. So for example, the first thing, and super basic, but I used to have stuff in the garage. So now it's like my office. I mean, it's full of this type of folders. I mean, I could show you and nerd out on that. That's one, and also acid-free, but also the provenance. Every time somebody sends me something, I create a folder on my computer, and I type, this is who sent it to me.
This is a spontaneous room raid.
Sorry, something came on. So Eric, it might be your audio, no? Okay, well, sorry about that. So so I do take a lot of care in terms of like who sent it to me, when, and then that gets backed up in my hard drive. I'm kind of like thinking about this a lot, and then I even have backup on CDRs just so I can have it. But also one thing I learned at first, I was just like, okay, thank you for sending it. After a while, I started asking them, can I share this? And also just typing in as much as I can when I received it. So I create a record that then, like I can go back to, because otherwise it's very easy to kind of lose track of it all. And yes, in terms of the trade-offs, I'm fully cognizant that Instagram is owned by Facebook, and it gets to be very murky, right? A flyer could be like, one might think, okay, the copyright, we're doing it for fair use. And I think of that kind of fair use doctrine, but I am very cognizant to when people send me something, and there's been a couple write-ups that have been done on Rock Archivo by different publications. So when that happens and they want to publish something, I ask the person, look, this is your flyer. Can so-and-so Remezcla or the New York Times or whoever, can they use this? Because that's something in terms of record keeping, who gave me what, and so they can be reached out. So that's one of those things that I use both in the digital and also the physical, and understanding that the physical, one thing that I'm going to be doing much more this summer is to be able to do a lot of the scanning, because we know that paper degrades over time.
Mm-hmm. I'll be honest, I'm learning this process right now. So I see Cesar's comment, and I would love help and advice. And I've gotten amazing advice from Pocha Punx, and yeah, just learning as I go, because it's very important that, things don't last forever. As we see with MySpace, I can't access any of those memories anymore. And looking back, like I just lost so much. So, and like LiveJournal and all these things or these like dead links and stuff. So definitely would love advice and such on how to keep that data. Cause I need to do that like for sure. And I'll just answer Marisa's question about funding, what I'm involved with in regards to my archive, and also from learning so much from Pocha Punx as well, supporting the band camps of the band, or where the bands are going to receive money, putting out their merch, buying the merch. I'm very notorious for supporting all their merch and artwork and such, as much as I can, because I'm a single parent, so it's tough. But yeah, definitely sharing shows, and if there are any community-based funds or anything like that, trying as best as I can, or just at least sharing it. I mean, as little as that, just sharing things like that, or if folks have a GoFundMe or things like that. As much as I can, but yeah, I'm learning from others, so yeah.
Oh, and don't worry, Margot, I will definitely reach out if I need the assistance of a professional archivist. I won't hesitate.
Likewise, and also please, thank you for all the librarians, archivists, people doing this work. So please keep following up with us, because I mean, personally, and I'm sure for Kristy and Eric, I mean, we would love to do this at different scales, and to, the more help, the better. For me, that's the importance of having these multiple homes. I always think of the advice that I was given, like, what if, so a truck hits me, and, what happens to these archives? So I'm very cognizant that I want this not only for my own research, but others that can benefit from it as well. And particularly with the audio archive, I mean, that's a little bit more thinking of the copyright, but I do at some point want to be able to see where those audios can be, because it'll be a shame if those were lost. I think that there's one question also by Marisa that and a bit with Cynthia, which is, I mean, the funding part, for me, it's been very, very DIY, and please chime in if you know, but how COVID and the BLM uprising has impacted their work. So I want to actually see how we can answer it. Eric, Kristy, Eric, I mean, what have you thought about this in the moment that we archive stuff from shows and going to people to watch music together and videos of people together? And I was like, oh, not social distancing. And also in the middle of this very important social uprising. So how has this impacted your work?
Well, okay, so in terms of the whole COVID thing of it all, let's see, in myself and I guess a pop-up catering company, East Los Masubi, who's one of the people involved, work at Rose City Pizza in Rosemead, and they've had art shows and a couple events there, and we were planning to have a collaborative kind of flyer show to highlight the history of the San Gabriel Valley punk scene, and so the idea was to, and I had already started doing this, reaching out to people who had submitted flyers to me so I could meet up with them at like various FedEx offices and make copies of their flyers so we could put them up on the wall of Rose City Pizza and have an event there. Now, not only am I hesitant to meet up with anybody to photocopy their flyers, but now they're just the fact that having a gathering anywhere is definitely worries me. So now we have to kind of figure out a different way to have this event where we can have it. Is it in a physical space? Is it done virtually? I'm really not sure, but that was a big plan that we just got scrapped because of the whole COVID thing. And I was also going to use that as a way to fund different projects that I wanted to take on with No Snappers by selling zines of flyers. But of course, now that I don't have, that I'm hesitant to meet up with people and photocopy these, get decent quality photocopies of these flyers to create a zine. Like, I really don't know what to do about that now. So it's kind of more of a wait and see thing at the moment. In terms of the Black Lives Matters uprising, that hasn't really impacted my work very much. One thing that I did do was I created a video on that I posted up on No Snappers using images from protests and audio from a SGV punk band, Syphic, using a cover that they did of Police Story by Black Flag. So that finally gave me an opportunity to use, I guess, to use older, a track from an older band to comment on what's going on right now.
I'll say that if venues are not around right now, a lot of bands are live streaming. So even watching the live stream, supporting the live streams, or if they are raising funds, a lot of the flyers, even if it's a digital or live stream, show some kind of support with the Black Lives Matter movement or COVID, especially in the Southwest. So there's no going around it. They are raising awareness and money. And as an archivist, trying, engaging with the Afro-Indigenous community and bands as well, which is very important. And I just think it's going on in a different way. And being a musician starting out, we just did a live stream, our band Observer Syndrome, and we raised some funds. And I invited the archive to participate and watch it And I also invited them to this too because, this is their archive. But yeah, definitely, there's just no way around it. It's on the flyers and such.
So I think for give me a sec. I'm just going through this. For me, it has been really important to think of, like this moment where before we could go to shows and now we can. So one is to just help out the artists, either in sharing their, what they're doing, in also helping them monetarily whenever possible. But for me, it's also with Black Lives Matter, what it has been really important is to see what is to start thinking what are the parallels between the past and the present, to perhaps make those connections, but continue to center, what we have been asked to, which is center the Black experience, center the Black demands right now. So a lot of the work that what I did in the last month, it was broadcasting, sharing sources, because I think that the attention, we want to center with them, but this also helps us think of how in the past we haven't done that, right? And so it has been a very interesting moment of reflection. And in terms of this pandemic, it is to think of what is it that we had in the past, in terms of shows, in terms of being able to hang out together, and how do we how we chart out this moment, and also, and how do we even record this moment. So in my actual practice, I admit that it hasn't been that. In teaching, I've been asking students to record their moments, like chronicle their moments, like think of even objects that they're preserving to think of the pandemic, because I think that even also what kind of songs are they listening to now, what kind of videos are they watching. I mean, just more rather than just sharing, but thinking of what is it that we're going to archive from this moment, both from the pandemic but also from this moment of racial uprising that hopefully can really bring about a more anti-racist practices in society, in the world, but also even in our own scenes. And that's something that I have been thinking very intently, because I think that we have seen those tensions between Latinx and Black communities in the past. And how is it that we say, no, I mean, this is the moment that we're actually going to practice this anti-racism ourselves and actually acknowledge our racism. So that's some of the messages that I've been sharing, but it's still a work in progress, right? Of even internally, and also how do we are constantly thinking of what is it that we archive.
Going off real quick, Jorge, I think that's such a great point. Like seeing what is being listened to. Going to one of the protests, I mean, the song was "To Live and Die in LA," and then a cousin that was a Riverside protest. It was Kendrick Lamar. So just doing this archiving of the soundscape of the protest and how bands are creating lyrics that are going to speak on racial injustice or the pandemic. And I'll be candid, today, or have some bands like, hey, share this, and it might not be social distancing, and I have to it puts you kind of in a pickle where you're like, I had to delete it because I'm just like, I don't want to promote unsafety or things like that. So as an archivist too, to really look into safety and the pandemic and things like that. I'm learning as I go, but something too, there are times where you have to make that judgment. Are they social distancing? Are they wearing masks? Things like that. So that's something that has changed, I'll say.
That's definitely, I mean, I'm sure we all seen it, like some friends or people that we know are doing some shows on the underground. It's like, what are you doing, right? Yeah. One thing is that it's 8:25. Sorry, it's 8:25, and I know we wanted to keep it at at an hour. So thank you everyone for really indulging us in and going a little bit over. As you can see, we can talk about this all night, but this is the part where it's kind of like the if Kristy and Eric are okay with it, like if you have questions on the chat, definitely send it to us or raise your hand. I mean, the raise hand button is on, I don't know where it is. or just type it on the chat, and I'll bring you in. And if you want, we can all unmute so we can like have a conversation, whichever. Why don't we do the next 5 minutes for questions on the chat, and after that, if you want to stick around and like chill with us, that'll be kind of that'll be cool. So I'll quiet down for a minute. That way, maybe if you have questions or comments, we'll read them. So Kristy or Eric, feel free to read the chat, and then in 4 minutes, then we'll see where we take this this after party. Okay.
Cool. Let's see. I think I lost some of the questions when I went back into the chat. I'm only seeing questions from the last few minutes. Or let's see. Yeah, I'll take any questions you guys got. Oh, you know what? I have something that I would like to get some feedback on. So, a lot of the flyers that I have are from the 90s, and it wasn't the most PC time. There's a lot of stuff that I guess was acceptable back then that definitely wouldn't fly now. And so I've come across a couple of flyers with some questionable stuff on it. In a lot of the flyers, it's not uncommon to see like no pigs, no cops, no jocks or whatever. But I have a couple of flyers that also, well, I'll show them. In addition to those things, I also say either no homos or no fags. And I don't know what the best way would be to handle something like that. As you can see, right here, there's, that's, I could easily Photoshop it, but, that would be, I don't know. I don't want to sanitize it in any way. I do want to show this scene, warts and all, but I'm not sure what the best way to approach that would be. I have a couple of flyers similar to this, and ever since I've started this project, I haven't known what to do about it. Do I just in the caption just say, hey, this is what the scene was at the time. Of course, it's not cool, and we don't condone any of that. Or should I edit it? I really am not sure what to do about that. So any feedback would greatly be welcome, because I'm not sure how to best approach that. And it's something that I've thought about for quite some time.
And I'm muting people now, so if you feel like you want to tell us something, you can definitely talk about it, or also just put it on the chat.
And I'm not sure, can people see this? Because I don't know what, I mean, it says my screen is being shared. Okay. Let me go to the chat and see if there's anything in there. Don't know how to do that. Oh, there's the chat. Let's see. Okay, yeah, thanks, Audrey. Yeah, I guess it should be, okay, so Audrey's saying, I agree to contextualize it. Also, sexism and homophobia is still present in a lot of the scenes. Yeah, that's true. And okay, yeah. And Jocelyn thinks it's a great entry point into discuss the history of homophobia in the scene. And Margot suggesting that I could post 2 pics with a text, letting followers know that the next pics has offensive content. Yeah, these are great. And I think it's something I definitely will take in consideration, because I do, I think in documenting this scene, I think it is important to kind of show everything, and it also will show how far our scene has come, because I never see anything like this in any flyers from the 2000s or up until now. Like that's just something that doesn't happen. So thank you very much for your comments. It's like I said, it's something that I've been thinking about for quite. It's great to have able to kind of bounce this off of. So I really appreciate that.
No, I think that these are definitely very important suggestions and also ways to think about this. And I think that it opens up these greater points of entry, right? As several of you have mentioned, we have to acknowledge the biases, the prejudices of different scenes, and also think of who were the people doing this at what time, and how were they perhaps responding or projecting different societal ideas. I mean, we think of 1980s punk, we have to think of Reagan. And we also have to think of the AIDS crisis, right? And also what were the connotations for that? And so it's really, I think that it gives us, like giving that context. And also to acknowledge, I mean, I think that it was Audrey and Adriana who, this also brings up the entry point of homophobia, sexism, and in different scenes, right? And how we can be acknowledged of that. I mean, in the scene that I look at, I mean, there was that tension between immigrants and second, third generation Chicanos, Pochos, right? And you sometimes would see it in the flyers by the exclusive use of Spanish, or even some like we don't play, I mean, like even just more coded, like no house music here. But then you would see the no snappers, right? And so it was really interesting how no snappers, it's part of different music cultures and youth scenes, right? Like the rave scene, the punk scene, even rock en español. So yes, you're right, Michelle, context and accountability. So, okay, we're 8:33. So other comments, questions, tomatazos on the chat, please.
I'll just share also that the work still continues. I've had to block a couple folks. And unfortunately with digital, it's hard to kind of tell, then things come out about particular bands or violence or sexual harassment and things like that. So you have that responsibility to hold people accountable. That is very, important in the punk scene, which lacks, unfortunately. But that every day, having to block people or not work with particular people and keep it a safe space is very important too.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. I think Cecilia has a question. If you all, any of you want to tackle this one?
That's a tough one. I don't think I've done as good of a job as I can do in regards to getting people outside of Instagram to interact with it. I in the before times, I would go to shows and hand out buttons and that I had made for no snappers and kind of get people involved that way. But that's kind of dried up at the moment.
Well, it was kind of a longer process, but I think sending the thesis work or the research to community members or the community is very important. But yeah, I think something like pins or something, that would be super cool. But yeah, definitely printing and just sending folks a copy or what's being archived.
I mean, for me, that's I hadn't thought about merch. So Kristy and Eric, that's something I should think about. For me, it's actually the Instagram and constantly talking about this. It's my way of making this research accessible to people that that otherwise, who has the time or wants to look at my still in work draft of of my chapter. So this is actually, as I was working on my dissertation, this was like those kernels of knowledge that I would put in. Otherwise, it would have taken longer. But I think that some of the posts, and I could do a better job of that, but some of the posts are actually very long because they are trying to give the context of a particular moment or a scene. And so I do. That's the way I do that, and so this is at least like the Instagram is not so much, and I don't think any was so much of an academic project as rather as like we are really invested and interested in these things, and this is how we share this work. But I'm sure there might be other ways, be it for merch or doing more videos that I think that I would like to take on. I mean, but there's only 24 hours in the day. And so I think that with that, I'm going to start wrapping it up. But I mean, I don't want to have the last word. So I'll give Eric and Kristy, like, please finish up. On my part, I really want to thank you all for joining and for sticking around. I mean, it's 8:36 and we still have 25 people. So I really appreciate it. Hopefully you learn more about what we have been doing. And this also, I have a poll. So here it is. We have been thinking since this is the first time we do this, and we're thinking, how about if we share more music? So maybe that's something that, and it has to, like maybe we're thinking on this concept of Zoom, that we share music and then we just talk about the song. So, I mean, feel free to say yes or no. I mean, this might be something that we do, particularly in these pandemic times, where we do a next one, which is less talking and more listening, and then we can all chime in about, like what songs we think of a particular moment, a scene, or time period or area. So that's something that we're thinking about to do next. And with that, I mean, Kristy or Eric, I mean, if you want to do your farewells or concluding.
Are we wrapping this up? Okay. Thank you all for joining us and participating. And again, thank you so much for the feedback on the flyer situation. Definitely helpful because I wasn't really sure how to handle it at all. Just, and for a while I was just considering just not even posting it, but I think it would be important to post it and address it. Thank you all for joining us. And Jorge mentioned a little Zoom after party, and I've got tons of free time right now, like I'm sure a lot of you do. So I'm totally open to sticking around and hanging out if anyone else wants to hang out.
I'll say thank you, everybody. Definitely could learn so much from all y'all, the librarians and DIY archivists here. Yes, and everything that you've all shared and different ways how to save materials. Like I need help. So, or just, trying to do the best job that I can. So I really appreciate all the feedback and for you guys sticking around. Thank you so much.
So thank you, everyone. We're going to stick around. We're done with our remarks, but feel free to stick around. Also, if you want me, I can unmute you and we can just talk, or we can do a breakout room if you want to talk to any of us individually as well. Thanks so much, everyone. And I'll be posting this it's on YouTube, but then you have access to it as well. Thanks. Alicia.
So it looks like, we're going to have a listening party kind of soon, maybe. Hopefully.
Hey, Susana, you made it. Thank you.
Sorry, you guys hear fireworks in the background.
Oh, no, I thought that was coming from my neighborhood. It's been getting wild in Boyle Heights for, I don't know, since late May.
So if you want, I can unmute everyone and we can just have a conversation on this. So if you're sticking around, I'm gonna unmute you, and then we can, you can just tell us good jokes at this moment or something. Cesar, you're sticking around, so since you're the person that we should be talking to regarding some archiving info, so definitely will this part be recorded? No, let me unrecord this part. So bye to the recording. Okay, so this we're not on, it's not gonna be on YouTube.